is My name is Tracy, and I'm co-founder of an organization called Grow Remote. Grow Remote is an award-winning non-profit that is in the business of community development, and we use remote work to achieve that. So we make remote work both visible and accessible. By remote work, we mean location-agnostic employment. That's a long-winded way of trying to bring it out from gig work or freelance or entrepreneurship into just good quality, decent jobs that are available to you no matter where you live. Location should not be a factor in the opportunities that are available to you. Anyways, we grew into 130 local communities across 17 countries. We were volunteer until October of last year when we hired in a team. And just to maybe get in ahead of Flipdish, we're now hiring for an operations lead that's live on our website. So while I have everybody here, I might put that in. But we were introduced to Brian recently by some friends in the IDA, and heard a little bit about the story of Flipdish, and we've thoroughly enjoyed working with them, right? Which is the first gate to pass. But also there's just a huge amount of opportunities available in Flipdish, and it's a prime example of where there are jobs and there is talent, and there's just a problem with the connection. So this is our way of solving for that, and we'd hope that you'd get to know Flipdish a little bit. You'd get to know a little bit about remote work, but that you'd also then go and tell your neighbours, tell anybody who's looking for work about these opportunities, because they don't come through recruiters, they're not advertised in the local shop. None of that happens. It's really up to us to generate employment locally. And so getting really familiar with the guys, as much as you be familiar with whatever your local employer is very important. So from here, I guess I'll pass it off to the guys. Sorry, one piece of housekeeping. If you have questions, throw them in the Q&A box, and that way we'll be able to make sure we get through them all and answer them. If we can't answer any live during the session, we'll send it back through email. So please do, we'll take a little bit from the guys first, and then we'll go through the questions after that. Keep it as lively as possible. We've asked them everything, so you can ask them everything. There's nothing, it's very open here. So that's it. And look, thank you very much for giving your time over to the community today. We massively appreciate it. And yeah, I'll come off the screen now. Fire ahead.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you very much for having us, and thanks to Grow Remote as well for all that you do. Hopefully everybody can hear me and see me okay. I'm going to share my screen and just get some slides moving here. So 1 second for that. Let me put that into presentation mode and make the most of the real estate. There we go. Okay, so myself and my colleague Eva are going to talk to you today about how Flipdish is operating in almost a completely remote capacity and how we're growing. We're also going to tell you a little bit about the company, just so you know what we're about, and a lot about what we've learned about how to operate remotely, especially in pandemic times, and also looking forward post-pandemic, how things are going to shape up in our opinion. So this is me, I'm Brian. Eva is with us as well. I'm the VP of Engineering. And Eva is the head of program management, and we're just going to tell you a little bit about ourselves first. We're both obviously working in Flipdish. I was born in Dublin, but I actually spent the last 20 years on the other side of the Atlantic in Boston, living and working there. And after becoming an American and starting an American family, we agreed to come to Ireland, which for me was a return. And it was, of course, in the middle of the pandemic, so that was interesting. But a really nice element of my return was to rejoin the Irish tech community, but also do it in such a way that it could help with some growth with rural development, like, just bringing technology jobs, which aren't necessarily coupled to an office anymore, and allowing remote opportunities to grow. So I actually ended up not in Dublin, much to the chagrin of my Dublin cohorts from childhood. I'm in rural Donegal in farmland. I can see sheep and fields and the Atlantic from my window here. And what do I do for Flipdish? I run engineering. So, and we run an engineering group that is fully remote. Eva, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Brian. My name is Eva. I was born in Poland, but for the past 16 years, I've been actually moving around quite a lot. I lived and studied and worked in 5 other countries in addition to Poland, including Germany, the Netherlands, but also quite exciting places like Jordan or Pakistan. And now I'm in Dublin, in Ireland. My first experiences working remotely were actually when I graduated my master in international diplomacy and public policy and moved to Jordan to work out of a hotel room for the United Nations. So that was my very first experience working remotely. And from then on, I've worked in management consulting as well, moving on to startup consulting, and been traveling so much that remote work is no stranger to me. And in 2019, I joined Flipdish to join the very exciting tech startup at the time in Ireland, which is such a wonderful platform for technology. And I am responsible for shaping a new department of program management office since November 2020, as we very well know, the height of the pandemic. So my experience with Flipdish has started before we went fully remotely, and I actually never met Brian in person yet. So
same here. I've never met you either.
So we know each other just remotely, which says quite a lot, and we do actually have a lot of work together.
Thanks, Eva. So let's just quickly introduce what Flipdish does and why our business is growing so much and the remote opportunity we have. So we are in the food ordering business. No surprise that with COVID, this has become a much bigger thing since in restaurant dining dropped off dramatically with lockdown restrictions. But even before COVID, this was a dramatically growing industry. There are plenty of stats on the slide here. I won't read slides ahead of you, but it's a very large market, and you've probably heard some of the other names in the market, or you might have interacted with them. But the Flipdish skew on this, or the Flipdish unique approach, is quite different from some of those other players that you might have heard of. For one thing, we don't see ourselves as needing to get in the way or in between the person ordering food and their favorite restaurant. We provide the technology for that interaction, but it's kind of silly if you think of a restaurant, they're trying to build a very loyal connection with their customers. And it doesn't make much sense for another third party to put their face in between or try to drive customers to a different, say, Indian restaurant or Chinese restaurant. We just want restaurant owners to have people order from them using apps or websites or kiosks or whatnot. And we provide the technology. In addition, restaurants are not a high margin business. So if you've ever talked to someone who has run a restaurant or been in the restaurant business, or if you've been that person yourself, you know that every transaction is precious. And if you're using a service that is taking enormous percentages of money from you, it better be worth that amount. We believe, pricing is super important because the restaurant success makes our success, and it becomes a virtuous cycle if we can have a really, really competitive price. So we build the most advanced technology we can, do it as efficiently as possible, and therefore we're able to charge a lot less than a lot of these bigger marketplaces or other companies that try to squeeze or fleece maybe some of the restaurants out of a lot of their margins. So what do we offer? Well, we are the complete ordering solution for restaurants, and we're the biggest one in Ireland by far, and we're in very, very large number of countries. You might have used this already. You might not have noticed, but plenty of our customers, you would have their apps dedicated for ordering very quickly and easily from that restaurant. Or you went to the restaurant and saw our kiosk, or you were just on the web on your laptop and you were ordering there, or even at a table and scanning a QR code to order while you're at the table. So that's what we offer. That's our technology, and it works extremely well. We're very happy with it. Our customers are really happy with it. Plenty of well-known names on the standard logo slide here. For over 4,000 different restaurants in over 20 countries. The general approach here is that as I said, we don't want to be getting in the way of the restaurant's interaction with their customers. So our technology is the foundation of the conversation, but as much as possible, it's the brand of the restaurant that shines through, not our brand. Eva, you want to take us through the story so far?
Yes, and it's been a journey. And what Brian just said, what we are now, it will possibly be quite interesting for you to know how it became. And officially, the timeline here starts in 2015 when the company was incorporated. But really, the idea occurred to our founders, Connor and James McCarthy, back in 2007, when Connor was thinking to design an online ordering system in college. He realized, though, that this already exists, so it's probably not a great idea. However, 7 years later, he noticed that nothing has changed and the user experience frustrations are the same as when he was in college. So he decided to give it a go just for even his own amusement. And after a while of designing, thinking, and developing, he realized he has a product that he could bring to the market. So sales have initiated. Many restaurants were called in Ireland, approached with this idea, and the feedback was overwhelmingly the same, that restaurants don't want to deal with yet another unsuccessful relationship with an aggregator who puts a level of separation between the restaurant and their customer. So back to the drawing board, redesigned the idea to serve that need of a direct order without having to have the ability to develop technology by themselves. James and Connor went back to the restaurants with a white label solution. So removing that degree of separation, giving them full control over the customers. Within a year, they've noticed a lot of traction. So it was quite successful almost from the get-go. And a team was built based on that. A little bit of angel investment was obtained, and they were able to secure a few employees who will be driving the sales and promotion. It was back in 2016 still a very small team, which is in most part still with us. So it shows how exciting this was for them to build. By 2017, the company was reaching out outside of Ireland already. So there were customers present in 4 different countries in Europe, and further investment was secured in 2018 to build a world-class white label ordering system with all the elements that restaurants would need, like Brian mentioned, whether it's app or web or in-store, in-restaurant ordering. So 2018 ending with a large, considerable at the time investment, the team was planned to be built further. I joined in 2019, which I think was quite a pivotal time when it comes to how quickly the different teams joined and the different departments were established in Flipdish. And just so you know, in 2019, we were still only 17 people. So it's been quite exponential from then on. And by the end of 2019, 2020, we had customers in over 15 countries, including places like Bali or the United Arab Emirates, which is quite interesting evolution, and shows the need as well that it is a global product, really. We have set up our offices not just in Dublin, but also New York and Berlin. And we've realized that we actually don't necessarily need those offices because most of our teams were working remotely nonetheless. So over the year 2020, which is when the global pandemic has started in March, we have been able to adapt to the situation and have gone fully remote out of necessity and out of need. And we were still able to grow our team from roughly 80 people at the beginning of 2020 up to over 200 that we are now. And the level of growth in number of customers and the geographical reach has also expanded. And now this year, at the beginning of this year, we have secured an investment of 40 million euro from Tiger Global. So we are on the way to scale further. And
Great.
when scaling, Brian, and if you want to switch to the next slide, when scaling and the whole time of the company's development, one thing that was very important both to the founders and the whole team working with Flipdish was culture and values. Rapidly growing businesses often skip that or forget about this being important. It happens that it just seems like it should be something intrinsic. In Flipdish, we have decided to make it very explicit. What is it that we are looking for? And this is a guide towards how to work in order to be successful, not just as an individual in the company, but as an organism acting together. So it's very important for us that we are moving in the same direction rather than against one another. So one of the values, and it's possibly the top one at this stage, is urgency. We are growing rapidly and there is this opportunity that is presented to us now. So we have to grab that opportunity and act with urgency, which means we're not looking for perfection. We are looking for things to be done. Ambition was explicitly mentioned in our values because all of us have different experiences with how ambition is perceived in a place of work, some of them negative, some of them positive. We wanted to make sure that it is known to be a positive thing in Flipdish, and we encourage, enable, and reward growth and ambition. High performance is a necessity for Flipdish. So all of the team members, whichever level and wherever they work in whatever area, are supported to be high performers. And this is important in order to achieve the goals that we set for ourselves. Further, openness, honesty, and respect. Ever since I joined Flipdish, I've never had an issue or a blockage to talk directly to our founders and be very open about what I thought Flipdish needs, what I think Flipdish has to improve, and that went for everyone in the company. So both the founders and every manager, every person in the company is open to feedback, which we see as a constructive thing. So we talk to one another openly without politics, which is kind of going with the urgency and high performance values for us. And last but not least, doing what is right for the company, generally the same as doing the right thing for the customer. We are a software as a service company. We serve our customers. If our customers are happy and grow and succeed, we grow and succeed as well. So we act together as an organism, again, rather than individuals with their own agendas.
Thanks, Eva. That's really excellent. So now that you've learned a little bit about Flipdish and what we're about, we're going to, since this is a Grow Remote webinar, we wanted to talk about a lot of what we learned about remote operation, especially in pandemic times and beyond. So I'll just go through some of that. It's almost frustrating but also exhilarating to see basically every company that could go remote in the last year did. So it forced a lot of companies that were very, stalwart. So no, everybody has to be in the office. It proved to a lot of those that, it's perfectly fine to go and work remote. On the flip side, this was not normal remote. this was truly a different situation, highly stressful and not optimal. So I know the picture kind of tells a story there. A lot of people have had kids at home or not in school because the schools are closed. And it's not fair to think that what companies have experienced in the last year is a typical remote situation. You can't, as I say usually to people, you can't just copy and paste your in-office culture and just say, okay, now do that from your house. So Flipdish was primarily an in-office company and embraced the remote opportunity in 2020. And in fact, you probably could give examples of companies, if you think about them in your head, of the ones who are tolerating remote versus the ones who have embraced remote. And Flipdish has certainly embraced it. So what does it mean to have a good, efficient, productive life as a remote worker at Flipdish? Well, there's a couple of things. Number one is asynchronicity. Big word, basically meaning that you don't need to be talking to people for 8 hours a day to get your work done. Unless your work is like a DJ or something and you actually need to be on the radio. You really do need focus time. And a lot of companies made the mistake in the last year of just overcompensating, feeling that they couldn't connect with their people or feeling like they had to allow them to talk a lot because there was no water coolers, there were no corridors between the toilets and the the cubicles. They're like, okay, let's do Slacks for everything, or excuse me, not Slacks, for Zoom calls. It can really backfire. So what we do is, especially in the engineering team, where it's an intellectual profession. Engineers need to be problem solving and writing code and putting things in their head and not be interrupted. So we've set aside mornings for the chats, afternoons for concentration, and Fridays we're even moving to things called Focus Fridays, where it's just meetings are banned. In addition, even if you get rid of the video calls, Slack can become just as much of an interruption. And when if you let Slack permeate your organization or Teams or whatever tool, and you don't have cultural expectations or explicit usage guidelines around it, it can be really bothersome and interruptive. So we actually have a very detailed document on our Slack expectations and what saying, yes, it's okay to turn Slack off, just quit it completely for hours at a time. Just as long as people know that you're off focusing, that's totally fine. Now, meetings, nobody likes meetings, they're necessary, but few simple things. Every meeting should continually justify its existence. A nice trick that some people do is say, expire a meeting series after say 3 months. And then you have to explicitly then decide, does this need to be renewed for another 3 months or whatever? Also, if someone in Flipdish joins a meeting and the organizer forgot to put in an agenda, they will typically ask this question, which we love, which is, great, you've put this thing on my calendar, you're taking my time, but when will we know that the meeting's done? How will we know that we can go back to our focus? And that's a good way of teasing out a real outcome or agenda for that meeting. There's something interesting around introversion and extroversion. Remote work, it's not that only introverts used to work remotely or work from home, but if you are someone who gets energized by interactions with people like me, I'm an extreme extrovert, then being on your own and sitting in front of a computer can drop your energy. So I'm okay with a lot of video calls, but an introvert probably wouldn't prefer that. So it's important to recognize their styles on your teams and understand that you can't just use one approach for everybody, and you probably have to consider a lot of differences there. Lastly, remote is a competitive differentiator. The reason we're on this webinar is because we have such a dedication to remote work. It means that for me, I'm hiring niche talent in engineering, and not everybody's in Dublin. There's not that many in Donegal, but certainly there will be at some point, I hope. But I just hired someone on the continent, and it's because they have decided, quite rightly, that work doesn't need to be necessarily done in an office. So I can hire them, as long as they've got a decently close time zone. That's fine. And the last point is really about what I'm in my story here. I moved with my family to Donegal because my parents are here. It's also radically cheaper. I've seen the housing prices in Dublin. It doesn't really appeal to me to go in that direction. And the quality of life, like when I go for a run, it's beautiful fields and whatnot. So let's talk about remote recruiting. I think interviewing is easier when remote, especially for the candidate. So if a candidate in an in-person context has to interview, they typically have to set aside either half a day or a full day. And then they've got to tell their current employer, oh, I got another doctor's appointment or a dentist again. And then, it's stressful. Candidates in the remote sense can have little sessions peppered throughout the week. It also is more sustainable to have a couple of 1-hour sessions over Zoom or whatnot instead of marathon in-person sessions. And I've done those. You're completely drained by hour 3 and your brain stops working by hour 4 entirely. And then you're just sort of on autopilot. So I actually think you get better conversations out of candidates when they have time to think in between those sessions and the phases of the interviews. And to embrace the asynchronous aspect, if you make reading material available online about what it's like to work at your company, then the candidate doesn't have to discover that by asking you lots of basic questions during the interview, which is kind of a waste of your time. You can just publish it on a blog and describe what it's like to work there. Lastly, I wanted to say this is especially important for the software engineers that we do, but I think it applies everywhere. What you would typically do in an in-person interview probably doesn't work remotely. For example, in engineering, it's very common to have people do whiteboarding of algorithms and code. There's no easy way to do that remotely. So instead, we try and simulate what it's like to work here, which is a good interview technique anyway. You want to evaluate how somebody would do on the job, so you simulate what it's like to work on the job. Just a couple of notes around burnout. This is my little diagram of where I think work and life balance went in recent years. A lot of high growth companies have people who risk burning out, and it's incumbent on the employers to make sure they create an environment that does not lead to that happening. In 2019 and before, this was pretty, I won't say easy, but it was possible to do, where if an employee was having to deal with a crisis and some real crazy system problem or whatever customer issue, that would push them into the burnout zone for a little bit. But as long as they come back out of that, then generally where the dotted line is, the average is that they're not in the burnout zone forever. In 2020, with lockdown, with the stresses of the pandemic, and with everybody shifting to remote, but not every company doing it in a very prescriptive way, it turned into a high, unsustainable environment for a lot of people. Thankfully, not at Flipdish. I think we've been able to manage this very well. And the way to look at this is actually, if you think about the main sources of burnout, the 2 items on the left, I won't go through all 6. You can read it there if you like. But the 2 on the left, a lot of companies did not do a good job with these 2 in a remote context. So there was too much work going their way. They weren't commuting in traffic for 2 hours a day, but instead of reading a book for those 2 hours or spending time with their family, they let work seep into their lives. And then it kind of became a little bit unhealthy. And then the lack of community or feeling connected. Not everybody is able to feel connected to their coworkers in a remote sense. So that did cause some issues. So one of the things we do, we adopt very explicit practices around what we call sustainable development. Now, this is, again, it's appropriate to the engineering team that I run, but it's perfectly applicable to any team. You just need to have an explicit management statement around what you want people to do. Make sure there's a good physical environment so that they get good sleep, etc. Make sure that they have an environmentally supportive environment so that there's good psychological safety. They can give feedback. They don't feel like they're under a threat of being fired all the time. And lastly is the cognitive stuff. And cognitive is around creativity, innovation, focus, all of those things. And if you want, you can go to sustainabledev.org to look at some of those. This has been, the disconnection problem is big. And I think it's very important for remote employers to be explicit about these things. We see disconnecting at the end of the day or during your holidays or vacations. Disconnecting is a leadership issue. Daily disconnection is important. If you have people working constantly in their brains, they're going to burn out or they're going to become ineffective. So it's in your interest, if you're an employer or a manager, it's in your interest to make sure your team members can disconnect properly. I wrote about this recently on my blog, More Than Coding, which you can look at, but this is the quick digest. Everybody should set boundaries with their schedule. It doesn't mean you can't violate those. If there's a crisis or if there's something you're really excited about working on, of course, work a little more, no problem. But in general, a good routine helps. Never sacrifice sleep. It's the biggest benefit, to your effectiveness during the day. 8 hours sleep every night if you can. I have a particular end of day ceremony where my laptop closes over, my dog hears it, and she goes nuts because she knows she's going to go for a walk. I love that she responds to it. And then, my laptop goes into a corner and that's the end of my workday. If I didn't do that and the laptop stayed around visible, it would extend the workday. And this is a little screenshot of the bottom of my phone. There are never, ever any red dots on my phone for my work applications. They don't interrupt me because that's not how I want to work. I want to interrupt my time when I choose. So I go into those apps when I choose. When people are taking vacations and time off, it's important that if you're a manager, that you tell them not to be checking in. If people are checking in, then they're not really taking that time off, and it's setting the tone that people can that people are expected to work on their vacations or on their holidays. And also, just a quick tip around Slack. We use this trick where we put it right in our profile name that we're out until a point, so that, because nobody pays attention to the Slack do not disturb thing. No one ever looks, but they do look at your handle. So it actually is, it's the one thing that's really sort of a neat little trick that has had a lot of good results. Just a quick note on innovation. This is the fear that a lot of companies have moving from an in-office model to remote is, oh, innovation won't happen. People aren't going to gather around a whiteboard. Well, sure, they're not going to gather around a whiteboard every day, because innovation happens differently in a remote team. With a remote team, you get the chance to have people concurrently work on difficult problems. And this is where you can leverage a thing called unconscious cognition, which is the phenomenon where you've probably experienced that you're in the shower or you're washing the car or doing laundry or something. And you're like, I just figured out the thing, or I had a great idea. Exploiting that is something employers could do a lot more of. Instead of forcing people into a room to innovate, set the context, set the problem domain, and let people disappear to come up with some great ideas in the background. Yes, sometimes you need to do whiteboards, but there's tools like Miro, and that can help with that. And there's also tools like Donut, which sets up these little coffee time chats across your organization. So there's plenty of tools, but most of all, it's around exploiting the opportunities we have to innovate in a different way as remote employees. Eva, you want to take us through the hybrid model?
Sure, thanks, Brian. I also have my ritual when I close my laptop and I tell Alexa to turn off the office, which is brilliant. It really helps to disconnect. The hybrid model, I'm sure a lot of you have seen on LinkedIn people asking if you could go back to the office, would it be when things go back to normal, will you go back to the office full time or not at all, or just a bit of this and that? And most of those polls seem to come with majority wanting some sort of a hybrid model to be a thing when things go back to normal. Meaning some people full-time in the office, some people full-time remote, and some people coming in sometimes of the week. This will become a challenge for many companies. We are trying to think about how to set it up best already now. If people wish to come back to the office, even though we foresee that probably majority will not. But in order to really prepare for the new normal, which has become a cliche phrase, I'm sorry about that, we have to make sure that the principle of equal opportunity is still there for all of the employees, whether they choose to work from the office, fully remotely, or a combination of the two. And the challenge seems to be with the people who will be fully remotely working outside of the office, because they will have to be on the same level, kept informed about what important decisions are being made, what important changes are being made, and going down to the very, very minimal ones that affect their work, have the same career opportunities and not be looked down upon or discriminated against by any of the managers within the organization just because they are not physically present in the office. To be able to build a reputation among their team members and among other teams, and have the same ability to influence, whether it's processes, decision making, or any other strategic or non-strategic changes that are being made in the company, and contribute to it. So we need to be able to set the communication and processes to go to remote normal stage. And we're working on it very hard. Our people team is working on this very hard right now. And we've been talking about it for a year, which to me means it's actually quite a considerable effort. How it could work from what we've been discussing and what research we've done is having an even distribution of remote workers across the teams and seniority levels, which is possibly even more important. We don't have any specific roles that should be or shouldn't be remote. So every role that we have open now, and everyone who is currently and has been employed maybe for years by Flipdish, has the opportunity to work fully remotely, not at all remotely, or a hybrid. We have already guidelines for meetings. We have set them to fit the current situation where we can't go to the office, we can't meet clients in person, but we need to take them further towards the hybrid model, normal remote work. We want the connection between our team members and the different departments. Communication flow is going to become more and more important the more we refine the processes. So we want to encourage some of the in-office staff to dial into the meetings, even if they can't be in a room physically. And I actually have been in such a meeting once, and it is a little bit of a mental weirdness around it. So it will take some getting used to, because my colleague I'm speaking to is right next to me in the room behind the wall. So it's kind of like speaking it's like speaking English if you're, say, a Spanish speaker to your Spanish speaking colleague. It's the same weirdness, in my experience anyway. Holding regular in-person sessions, maybe once in a few months, for some people maybe more frequently or less frequently, but the in-person sessions are also important for them, maybe more than for you as a manager. So consider that. Consider what their need is, and invite the remote workers to visit the HQs. We have done that in the past when we were really not facing the pandemic or the idea of it or even the threat of it. When we opened the offices in Berlin and New York and Barcelona, now in London, we have organized quarterly meetings where everyone was flown in to get to know each other, to experience how the other colleagues operate and work, and what is there to learn from that. So we've done that before. We think it's still a good idea to continue doing that. And put effort into information curation or knowledge management for internal information important to your team members and managers. We use Notion, which I think is a great tool. It is as good as you use it, obviously, but it is a great source for information for us. We have roughly anything from 2 to 30 people starting each week at the moment. When they come on board, there is a lot of information to absorb. It's difficult to absorb and remember all of it at once. We do organize intro sessions and onboarding sessions and so on, but a lot of that knowledge that we communicate in meetings is stored for future reference. So these are the areas of focus that we have considered important when going hybrid.
Thanks, Eva. One last point. We do predict a bit of a backlash because of how companies operated remotely in a suboptimal manner. Not us. We believe we did a decent job, but a lot of companies just tolerated remote. There will be a swing, everybody get back to HQ, get into the office from some companies, and it's important to compel them to say, it's not that remote work is bad, or if you found you had a bad experience with it, that it didn't work. That doesn't mean remote work in general doesn't work for you. It means the pandemic sucked and it was pretty awful, and people were forced to work from home with not great circumstances, and as much as possible, hopefully that backlash won't happen. Maybe it'll be minimal, but let's celebrate those companies that embrace remote working as the norm, really, for digital workforces, not ones that see it as a secondary thing or an afterthought. And that picture there, just to remind you, that is of a half mile away from my house here. That is where I was running at lunchtime the other day. It sort of embodies for me one of the greatest values of remote is that I was able to choose with my family to pick that place to live in. And that's one of the major benefits. Now, if you are interested in joining our team, we'd love to have you apply. I can't, with the amount of positions open in all the different departments, I think the best thing to do is just tell you to go to our careers site. And that way it'll go to the appropriate person. And we also want to say thank you for listening. And now we would like to take any questions. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can focus on the Q&A. Tracy, did you have, I haven't been able to look at the window, but are there any good questions we should start with?
Brian, that was the best pitch for remote work that I have ever heard. I think that was like everything that is, not the glossy part was addressed there. I was watching that going, if we could even do that and grow remote, that'd be great, but we're not there yet.
Thank you.
So we have quite a few questions. Yes. Okay. So first one, and you might have addressed some of these, but I'll just kind of go over and sure. You can go through them. Thoughts on the hybrid model, which a lot of companies are planning to implement post-lockdown. You kind of touched upon it there at the end. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out proportion-wise, like what the ratio will be of companies that swing all the way back to everybody get back in the building. Go sit on the M50 for 2 hours a day. That's your life. Just get used to it. And how many companies will say, you know what? let's keep some people at home, and it's hard to predict, but it's going to be very interesting.
Sorry, I'm reading the questions at the same time. Despite all of the stereotypes, I'm a terrible multitasker. Maybe other women are better than me, but I don't. What is your interview process for devs in particular? Martin asks.
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, exploiting two things, which is the value of remote interviewing and asynchronicity, in order to simulate a work environment. Developers, when they apply, will look at their CV. If we like them, then we have a quick one-on-one Zoom call, usually with a recruiter, just to, it's like matchmaking. Let's look at your criteria as an engineering professional, what you want to do. And if your criteria match what we're looking for, that's a great reason to continue the conversation. If not, we part ways and we're still friends. The next step, if that goes well, is it will be a meeting with a technical manager. And if that goes well, we try and compress things as much as possible, where we send you a little homework. It's just a little bit of engineering work to do at home. And if that goes well, and you can use Google, you can talk to your friends about it, that's fine, because that's what you would do if you were working here. It's not a test. There's too many companies that have these awful online tests where you're getting graded, and it's like, oh my God. No, we want to see your creativity and how you approach work. So once that's done, then you meet with the team to go through your solution, and then we issue an offer if that's successful, pretty quick.
Brilliant, Martin. I hope that answered your question. Will the slide deck be available for download? Porig asks.
I can certainly provide it to you, Tracy, and I don't know how you typically distribute them, but we can make that available.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could. Mary Doherty asks, Donegal, actually, lady as well, I believe. Do you, and I liked, by the way, the pitch for Donegal at the end, just thrown in there, yeah. Sorry, do you work from home remotely exclusively, or do you use a digital or co-working spaces?
We haven't really started to use co-working spaces yet. Absolutely no objection to them. In previous employers that I worked for, I was a big fan. I think what we would say is absolutely whatever makes people effective. We don't mind if they're at home or in a co-working space or sitting in their car. It doesn't really matter. Not that they would sit in their car for long, but I've taken calls from my car. It happens. So I think it's, again, one of those things that if you prefer to get out of your house because there's just too much noise or there's better Wi-Fi in the co-working space, absolutely. That's the right way to go.
And I might just add, we do actually have two physical offices, one in Dublin and one in London. And at the moment they're closed due to the pandemic and the essential work and so on. But we do plan to repurpose the space, and there will be some opportunity to come into the office and work for all of our staff who wishes to. We won't have the same capacity anymore, though, so that will be another adaptation to how we work and operate.
That's right. Keep our real estate costs down. Keep our rents down.
Another one in, how accessible are the jobs for fresh professionals? I guess entry-level roles that they're asking. So this particular person is coming out of boot camps, online professional courses, things like that. By the way, we've got a free nationwide course in remote work that's available. And is there, sorry, to go back to the question, is there an attempt to bring those professionals into the company and develop them? Thank you.
I love that question. Thank you, Romulo, for asking that. The answer is yes. With a very big yes. There's more demand than spaces, but we have made a very explicit decision not to skew to very senior people only. It is not the way to create the next generation of technical professionals by only hiring the 10 plus year experts. We have found so much value from hiring interns. We were working with FOSS on some bootcamp graduates from them, and we hired 3 out of their recent cohort. We also have internships open for this summer for people who are in software programs, be they degrees or certificates or boot camps or whatnot. We have hundreds and hundreds of applicants, so we will do our best to hire as many as we can. but we're very keen on hiring and developing the next generation of professionals for sure.
And just, I might add that historically, approximately 90% of our interns progressed into full-time positions and since have grown to less junior levels, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Brilliant. And that kind of ties into Mary Murray's question, which is what type of job positions are available within your company? And it seems like whatever.
All of them. Yeah, the company is scaling kind of equally in a lot of domains. I mean, engineering, we doubled the size of engineering in the last 3 or 4 months, but everything's growing: support, legal, design, HR, you name it, it's growing.
Brilliant. So two kind of similar questions from Vanessa and an anonymous attendee. Vanessa says, and hello Vanessa, great to have you here. Are there opportunities in Flipdish for people who may not be engineers or have experience in a SaaS company? And then another person asked the same question slightly differently around pivot hires. So if you're moving from one industry into another, and I can imagine, Brian, actually, if you're coming out of the restaurant industry, you might be pretty good for some of the roles that are within Flipdish. But
most certainly, I would say the multidisciplinary pivot is one of the biggest opportunities for employers. We just issued an offer to someone who was a medical doctor for an engineering role. We have engaged with a lot of people who have that say atypical background, that their path wasn't necessarily, went to college and studied it and then went to a tech firm. If you've learned how to interact with people, how to support customers, how to handle different priorities of work in another environment, those skills will apply just as much here. Yes, there's going to be some base skills for different jobs that you might need to have. Or there might just be a great opportunity to say, you're a super smart person with high potential. Let's get you on board and train you in those things. So yes, like I have not always worked in SaaS, for example, as Vanessa asked. There's a time for everybody who worked in SaaS, there was a time that they did not. And it's really important for employers to not have a gatekeeping approach where they say, oh, you got 9 out of 10, but you didn't make it, sorry. It's just not, it's too cold, and it's just not a practical approach. So we look at potential and the experience from any domain that you might have had.
Brilliant. And a couple of questions in around where you hire. So do you hire mostly in Ireland, across the European time zone? There's a couple of people in from Australia.
Great question. A couple of years ago, it was primarily Ireland. Now it is global. So it depends on the role. And actually, I think it should be listed on each role on the career site. The way to think of it is, if it's highly specific to that country, like if it's a UK sales manager, you're probably going to need to be in the UK. For an engineer, like I said, we need you to have a decent amount of time zone overlap for collaboration. So most of the continent is fine. Even through Africa, the time zones match pretty much for a tremendous amount of countries, and decent internet. That's the only other thing. We do need to be able to talk to people and collaborate. So I mean, if I can get good internet in Donegal, most people can get it. So.
There are a number of roles filled from Argentina. We even have our team members in the Philippines. So it really depends on the role, I'd say. But yeah, we are quite spread out.
Yeah.
Great. And kind of along those lines, does the company offer sponsorship?
In terms of visa sponsorship, I would imagine that's the question. I think we have. I can't remember all the details. And again, I could answer for you very confidently about American visa sponsorship, since I know all about H1s and L1s and all that stuff. I'm so new coming back to Ireland about the stamp 4s and stamp 1s. I don't want to give an authoritative answer, but certainly I know we have hired people on different kind of visas, but I don't want to give an authoritative answer that was incorrect. So I will have to follow up on that.
Brilliant, thank you, Brian. There's a lot of questions coming in. I'd say we could stay on for another hour at least, but we'll aim to wrap it up in the next 5 or so minutes. Owen, can you speak about your internships and how you will approach them remote? That's an interesting question in general around how companies approach internships. So,
yeah, it's harder because typically an intern in a physical environment gets to sit beside a mentor. So we create a high touch environment where there's probably twice daily calls with the interns and their technical buddies, as we call them, and their buddies get to sit with them and check in very frequently. So it's a lot of alignment on a twice daily basis, just to make sure they have what they need, that they're getting good feedback, and that they're able to ask questions. The other good thing is that because we're heavily on remote, they can ask questions on Slack at any time. So it doesn't have to be when the mentor is free. Anyone can help them during the day. So it is slightly adapted to be a little bit different because of the remote aspect, but we've had great success with it so far.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Same person, Owen, you ask great questions. Do you have any advice to stand out in applying for an internship when you were one of hundreds? In general, I suppose remote jobs, like you don't have any limit on the location, so there's lots of, it's so competitive. So what can people do to stand out?
This is a hard thing. I've been helping people craft their CVs on the Irish Tech Community Slack recently, just to give them a bit of assistance on that. I would boil it down to a couple of things. Number one, if you were thinking of it like a marketing exercise, which it really is, or an advertising exercise, look at the competition. Go look at LinkedIn. Go look at what other people do. Look at what people who are very popular in the industry, a lot of them publish their CVs on their blogs, and just see how they're structured. And just try and up their game. Beat them at that game. Be creative. If you have a creative designer who can rework your CV, don't just use the typical template from Microsoft Word. Do something a little different, and that's where you can kind of stand out from the crowd. And also, when you submit your CVs, put a personal note. Put some thought into the personal note about why you want to work there. And the big mistake people make in CVs and in these notes is they talk about what the company should do for them. They're like, I want to develop, I want this. That's great. We do want you to develop, but companies, maybe not so much for Flipdish, but a lot of companies are kind of selfish, and they're going to think, yeah, we don't really care what you get out of it. We want to know what you're going to bring to us. So make sure you don't just focus on you. Make sure you focus on what you can contribute.
Brilliant. Nacho asks, is it a plus if you're an advanced level Flipdish user already? I don't know what that might look like, but I think using the product is probably a good idea. But advanced level takeaway order, I don't know.
Well, I think that's actually very cool. Yes. Hey, if you've got product knowledge and you're working and you have opinions on the product, be it good or bad, absolutely it would help, because that's every company wants to hire people who know their product. So yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose it's the same person just asked, do they have to apply for a specific position, or can they just send a CV in? Do you take it that way in terms of maybe?
It will be given our size, it has to be for a particular position. But I would say just, have them look at the positions open and pick the one that is, or ones that are most appropriate.
We get hundreds of applications every day, and we have currently, I think it's over 40 positions that are open. So there is a choice, a wide choice at the moment. Amazing.
Okay, so we might just finish off on these two questions, and then we'll ask you for any closing advice from you both. But because somebody just asked about are the roles flexible with working hours for parents with small children, and somebody else asked, as well as remote, what flexibility do you offer in terms of working options, hours, part-time, vacation leave, etc.?
Yes, all of those. No, it's not a free for all, right? There are times in different teams when they have to be online, like for certain meetings, but generally, like last night, I decided to work late, but I also decided to take a very long lunchtime, and I sort of made up for it later. And that was fine. It's just, I structured my day around, because I had to prepare these slides, for example, and I just didn't want to be working for 12 hours straight. So yes, most teams are quite flexible around that. you'll have to remind me, Tracy, the second part of that question was around
hours, vacation, and
vacation. Yes. So yes, we're not one of these companies with the unlimited vacation. That's actually really limited because people are like, oh, you're taking some more time off. Good for you. You know, not one of those passive aggressive types. We offer, you know, a lot of vacation time, and we want you to take it, and we don't want you to take it all in December when you realize you're going to lose it on January 1st. So we are continually watching to make sure people aren't burning out, and we tell them, you know, you have to take some time off.
Okay, brilliant. Well,
there was one other question actually on Women in Tech Reboot, and I'm really excited that someone asked that question because we just signed up for that, and we have tons of people coming in to interview from that program. And I would support anybody who, any women in tech, please look at that program. I think it's a somewhat government-led, fantastic program. We fully support it.
Okay. Well, just you guys hiring remotely as a base is enough for us, right? But getting so engaged in the community and helping us out and being a great employer on top of all that helps us no end, right, in terms of our communities. I'll just echo out again, there's a big problem in terms of location agnostic work and activating that locally. And the difference between us having the jobs and the jobs landing, no offense to the other people on the call, in Argentina or Australia, is us knowing enough about them and telling people who we know. So please do help us spread the word. Any last piece of advice in terms of getting through the noise and getting in and working at Flipdish?
I would say be passionate, make sure your internet is good, and just be stubborn. Don't take no for an answer, and keep at it.
That's it. Okay, well guys, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for participating. We'll send around the slides in an email after this. And yeah, that's it. That's all from us. Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye.